Well, howdy everyone, good evening. Thank you guys so much for coming out here today and celebrating the wonderful holiday of Tax Day with us. Really appreciate it. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you everyone on the live stream for signing in today. Today is a really cool day for us here at the Cannabis College. Back last November, Steve and I had a couple grow classes. We had done a cloning class, talked about super soil, and we were trying to figure out sort of what's next. And we looked at the idea of we should build out this 4-month semester, the idea of walking people through not just starting a seed and getting it to be in soil that's really high quality, but growing that plant to be really large and then walking through the drying and curing process. So today is not just a culmination of today's class independently, but also this whole semester. So if you're one of the people that's been growing along with us the whole time, thanks for riding that journey with us. This is your first time. Welcome. We're really happy to have you here. We've got two really incredible instructors that we're going to be having on tonight. But I'm really happy to have back at the Cannabis College to talk about drying and curing 201. We got Brian Rice and Matt Robidou that are going to be introducing themselves in just a minute. But truly, thank you guys so much for coming out here tonight. At the end, I'm going to plug some other classes that we got going on, talking about what to do with your stuff after you've dried and cured it, maybe some processing or concentrating. We're all about that here. But for tonight, I'm really excited to be focusing on how to preserve those terps, how to get that flower. You've been growing it. How do you preserve it? Well, that's what tonight's going to be about. So I'm going to pass it on over to Brian Rice and Matt Robidou. Thank you guys so much for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, let's see if this raise a hand. Who was here last November on that first drying and cure? Anyone in the crowd? Show of hands. One. Camera guy, he was there. Well, good. So we have a jam-packed agenda. We're going to run through this. If you were here last time, you might see some things familiar, but we're also going to try. We also added some new things onto here for you guys. So, here's our agenda. If I can see this. Obviously, we'll introduce ourselves, talk about the drying and curing cannabis at home. What's the difference between drying versus the curing? We're going to dive down deep into the science. Start talking to you when to start curing, how to actually kind of cure it. And then obviously Boveda, our two-way humidity control, and how that will help throughout the entire process. So I'm Brian Rice. I'm the VP of Head of R&D and Innovation at Boveda. I oversee the design, development, and innovation of new products. Currently, those three: cannabis, tobacco or premium cigars, and music. So anything that swells and contracts, wood guitars, violins as well. I've actually been growing on and off for 20 years. Jeez, has been 20 years. Both indoor and outdoor. The more kids I had, it pushed me outdoor. So I had to put some babies where they were growing. Prior to Boveda, I worked at General Mills, Pepsi, Boston Sci, and also 3M. And I told people before, like, yes, you can work at these companies and still smoke and grow weed. I'm born and raised here in Minnesota, Northeast Minneapolis. I got 5 kids, 2 dogs, 1 cat. And that 20 chickens was last year. Coyotes got some of them, so we might be a little less than that.
All right. What's up, everybody? I see some familiar faces from Canna Connect, so thank you guys for stopping by my booth. My name is Matt Robidou. I'm the founder of Raiden Labs. Raiden Labs is really we're focused on science-backed education and consulting growth, and that's really facilitated through my my academia right now. I'm going to the U of M for plant science, and I'm going to be going to graduate school here in the next year or so, and hopefully doing my PhD. I say hopefully because a lot could change in the next year, so who knows? I've been cultivating cannabis for 4 years. I was in the Marine Corps, got out, started growing really just to save money, to be honest, and then it turned into a wholehearted passion of mine, and really I was just curious about what gave us this medicine and how does the plant create it, and first, I'm sure most of you have really noticed that Cannabis is a very intriguing looking plant, and especially when you grow it, a lot of people don't see the, early flowering stages. We either see in the veg or we see late flower. And so really seeing those white, pistils sticking out everywhere is a really interesting appeal to it. I'm married and I just had a daughter in November. So right after I taught the last class, I had my daughter. So she's 4.5 months old now. So yeah, I've been really busy.
With weed and diapers.
Yeah. So first we're going to talk about harvesting. There's several methods for harvesting, and one thing to note throughout this class, everyone's grow is going to be different. This plant here was the plant that I grew for the last class last month, the How to Grow a Really Big Plant class, where I yielded 580 dry grams in a 5x5 with this plant. And so you can kind of see the breakdown of like how I harvested this plant and ended up, drying it. And so going through some of the methods, whole plant dry, a lot of times that's done outdoor. You just chop base of the plant, you hang it up. Ideally, you pull off as many fan leaves to remove as much water as possible from the plant. And really the issue with that is you have the highest mold potential. So if you do that, you really want a well-ventilated, well-circulating room. V-branching is the next one. That's kind of my term for it. But basically you're just taking the node here and you're chopping the internode space, and you're taking this section where it makes this V here, and you're hanging each of those on a hanger or something of the sort. And so you're essentially removing these internode sections, because really at this stage of harvest, we want to get as much water out of the plant as possible, which is the same reason why we remove those fan leaves. And then you can also do individual branches, which is actually what I did in this model. The plant was too big. I had it trellised, so I ended up just chopping off each branch and then hanging them up from one of the axillary branches there on the hanger. And then bucking is really the fastest but the lowest quality result, as you get a lot of terpene evaporation and just your buds are going to be destroyed. But if you're looking to process a larger amount, or if you're going to maybe extract it into an oil at home for edibles or make butter or whatever, this would be a pretty acceptable way to do it. For your drying environment, so there's some pretty standard values here that you really want to adhere to no matter what. Really, the first is the temperature, 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It's really that you don't want to go higher. Lower is not necessarily the worst thing, but higher, you start to really just increase the molecular movement, and so you're going to get a lot more evaporation and degrading of cannabinoids and terpenes. And then your optimal RH is probably the biggest value, most important value for a proper dry, because if you go over, you're probably going to get mold. If you go under, your bud's going to over dry to the point where you're going to lose a lot of the whole plant medicine, and you won't lose any cannabinoids. Just so you guys know, cannabinoids they're not volatile at all, so they'll stay in the plant. There's actually one farmer that I know who harvested his first crop in 2019, and he still has it sitting in bags because he grew so much of it. And this is hemp, but both cannabis. But the point is that he's able to continuously process that. And sure, there's no terpenes or really much of anything that has any sort of volatility to it, but those cannabinoids will really retain. So we're talking primarily about volatile compounds. Darkness is ideal to prevent light degradation. The plants are really still alive for, I would say 7 to almost the entire drying process, to be honest. Those cells, they don't operate in the same way we do. They don't have like central nervous systems or anything like that, where you can just like instantly kill the plant, so to speak. The cells will continuously respire and transpire even when they're drying. And so they're really off-gassing, and they're just slowly deteriorating and as the cells die, the chlorophyll will break down, and ethane will start to be released, which is the hormone that causes essentially like flower death. It triggers that. And so in our opinion, the tent really is the best for at home to dry in, especially in Minnesota, because you can create a optimal environment for that. But a basement room works as well. That's what I do still. I don't have a specific like drying tent, and I like to keep my stuff moving, and so I just I'd rather plant a new plant than use that space for that 2 to 3 week drying process. So how do you know when it's dry enough? Brian, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, just right off the bat, I'm not an expert. I've been doing this for many years. I'm learning every time I grow, every dry, every harvest. And some of the things that you'll know when it's dry enough, and this is without having a scientific method, grab the stem. If it's cracking at one point, that means it should be at a good state to pull those buds off and start curing. Some of the buds, although the stems will have hardly any moisture in them and they'll crack, the buds themselves will have some moisture in, right? Because that moisture and water wants to kind of come outside from the inside of the stems and the buds to the surface. So feeling your buds, I'll touch and feel. Those leaves are obviously going to be crispy, right? Just like fall, leaves outside. Some of that, what's going to be interesting though, is you're going to use all your senses. That smell is going to change very, very differently. It's going to change throughout the whole drying process all the way to the cure. So your nose will tell you as well. But you can dry too fast and you can dry too slow. So there's a happy spot right in between. We were just talking earlier, my harvest from last year, I grew Girl Scout cookies, and man, it was fragrant. But we did some testing on it. I wanted to see what would happen when it dried too fast versus too slow. Dried too fast, most of those terpenes are now gone. I got a bunch of weed that doesn't smell. It's strong, it's potent. So that's going to go for like edibles and things. But too long is now you're not allowing that moisture and water to evaporate and come off the stems. And now you're really fighting and risking mold. So too long is mold. Too fast and too hot, bye-bye terpenes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Do you ever dry faster, hoping to have it be less pungent, like you mentioned for edibles or such?
Yeah. So if I don't care about terpenes, yeah, dry as fast as you want. If you want to make butter or tinctures, if you're not concerned about the whole entourage effect, and especially you're going to go to a distillate or terpenes are going to be gone. Just know that for sure. Yeah. Yep.
So here we got a good old graph that shows some different, let's see if I can get so we got green here, higher temp, lower humidity. And then all the way over to your longest, or I should say the trending towards the longest amount of days, you end up landing in this optimal range here of right around 6 to 10 days, roughly. Too fast, you get uneven drying, terpene loss. And too slow, you get increased risk of mold. And as you can see, this moisture content is within the bud itself. If it retains this higher level within the first few days, that's your high. This is like your danger window right here. 65% right there, that's likely going to mold. And sometimes you might not even notice the mold. That's the thing. Most bud does have mold in it. We just don't notice it because it's in such small levels where that window for it to grow is maybe only a few hours. And so there's only a certain amount of spores that are able to proliferate and produce, the conidia that will then continue to replicate. And so most of the time at home grows, we don't notice the bud rot that's setting in from botrytis, but if you do push it too far, you will notice with I don't know, has anyone had moldy buds? They look really gross. They're like, I mean, it's any sort of, maybe even like bread mold, right? Like kind of that grayish, whitish, hairy. You can really tell if you look at the outside of a bud and you see kind of a brownish tint on it. If you investigate in there, you start peeling it away, you'll see, especially look on the stems and stuff, you'll see some kind of hairs going on if you ever run into that. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not good. And there are certain people that are very susceptible to it. So inherently it's, especially if we're growing bud, I mean, most people like to share, and that's written into our law, is that we can legally give and share flowers. So, we want to do our best to make sure that we're not sharing, tainted bud especially with our closest friends and family. So
with that, many years ago, I would very caution if you are growing, you see mold and you're using for medicinal properties, and your immune system's already suppressed and low, throw that away. Yeah, very bad. I think that's probably the only first time I've heard of someone actually passing away from smoking weed because they were already down there and smoked some bad weed, and obviously respiratory infection and led to other things.
So in your opinion,
go ahead.
59 Fahrenheit, 55% relative humidity and a vapor pressure deficit of 0.8 is
So
around the optimal range?
it's around the optimal. I would say, in my opinion, the RH, if you do 62 and you can maintain that for sure, that is like the almost premium range of like just optimal retention without you're really riding the line of mold formation, which is why you're not at 63, is because you don't, if the outside's at 63, there could be a little moisture pocket that's at 65 or 66, and then you're going to get that formation. So 62 has been traditionally like the really the optimal range. And if you can hit that, this is just for this specific study, the values that were used, which were standardized at 55, which is still at the bottom end of the optimal range. But 30%, that's too fast, right? Like
I think my basement grow area is 60 to 60.
Right,
60,
like
60,
that, which is great, and that's
Perfect.
close to what mine is as well. And
Yeah.
and I actually just put a humidifier in there, and I set it to 62, and it will literally just continuously keep it at that at that RH, and it's amazing.
Yeah, what you don't want to do is ever get above 65.
Yeah,
Dryer
It's
is
so
better.
fast.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't want to get above that.
Okay, so just touching on some chemistry here with terpene volatility. So terpenes are always leaving, always changing. If you guys have heard of terpenoids, those are actually, you have an oxygen attached, so it's technically a different molecule than a terpene. But generally with volatility, if these are all nonpolar, meaning that they do not have a charged end to like grab onto something. So think of it as if you have no charge, you don't have anything to hold you there. And so the terpenes can just fly away because nothing is holding them. On top of that, being only having 10 carbon atoms and 16 hydrogen atoms, they're incredibly light. And so in conjunction with being nonpolar, that both mono and sesquiterpenes are very volatile. Monoterpenes being more so. And they're all essentially just like Lego. I like to think of organic chemistry as just like Legos and stuff. And so this is literally one unit of what connects together to make different. And there's more terpenes in this. So it goes beyond sesquiterpenes. There's diterpenes and all these other ones. And so these connect together where you have the hemiterpene, which is one isoprene unit, monoterpene, which is two, where you can see this right here is one, and this right here is the other. And then same thing for here, this is three. So you have the one here, and then one on this side. So they just keep kind of connecting together. But monoterpenes are the most abundant and the most lost. So, which, you know, there's just, this is kind of a random note, but a lot of monoterpenes are very harsh. And a lot of growers that I've heard and that in the legal markets have done like they actually noted like a more enjoyable experience with a certain amount of certain terpenes that are extra, especially harsh, that they want them to leave. And especially if you're making like a concentrate, there's certain terpenes that, you know, maybe they don't either smell good or they don't have a very pleasant like smoking experience. And so that's just something to note, is all terpenes are not equal. There's certain terpenes that we do want to save, and there's other ones that we're like, we don't mind if you leave.
That's interesting. I didn't, that 40%, would you say that 40% is the monos?
Oh yeah, a large portion of that, it would be the monos. And that's the thing, is a lot of times we are only left with those smaller values. However, the cool part is that those small values of remaining terpenes still can make a large impact to the experience of the flower. So it's, you know, it's kind of it's not necessarily the worst thing for those to, like I said, for certain monoterpenes to off gas. And of the ones that we know of, you know, I'm sure everyone's heard of the common like linalool, myrcene, all those are the great ones. But there's a lot of ones that nobody talks about that are still there and present, and we, you know, we haven't even looked into them yet. So you know, there's so much more depth to this aspect of like what makes good cannabis good and bad cannabis bad and all that. Yes.
When people talk about like some terpenes for flavor, some others for aromas or taste, and others have like medicinal properties, do you see that correlated into specific terpene styles lead to specific amount of terpenes lead to only flavor, no medicinal value, or vice versa?
I mean, from my studies, I would say there's definitely some that have, you know, they serve more of X purpose than Y and vice versa. But yeah, a majority of terpenes are, you know, they not only have the smell and all that, but they participate in certain biochemical like reactions and pathways that they end up providing some sort of a unique benefit. There's very few terpenes that we found that are inherently like, you know, like negative in their effect. Most of them, like there's more research coming out now of terpenes aiding in anti-inflammatory properties. So that is a huge thing because almost everybody could benefit from anti-inflammatory benefits. So yeah, that's a really deep question. I think we're still uncovering that, but right now, you know, it's kind of categorizing each terpene and what it does best, I guess, and then really elevating like that aspect of it. Yeah. So here. Okay. And then ethylene. So I brought this little molecule to kind of showcase because it's just interesting to look at the unique nature of it. And so you have a double bond in the center there. And that double bond essentially makes this molecule not able to change. It cannot articulate. You can't twist it at all.
Not too much. That's two.
And so really, if you look into what ethylene does in plants, it's essentially responsible for signaling death, like tissue death. It also is a growth regulator and all that, but it's essentially a marker of the plant's life cycle. Early on, the cannabis plant in veg does not produce much ethylene. Later on in its life, it starts to produce more and more and more ethylene. So by the time you get to harvest and you chop those buds off and you stick them, if you do it too fast and you stick them in a jar, you're basically trapping. Remember, I said the cells are still potentially living. You're trapping those living cells with a hormone that's telling them to die at a rate and in a way that is not ideal. And so then you start to get those non-desirable effects where you get, you know, oxidation and that's all cued off by this ethylene because it literally causes flower death.
Ethylene's what makes your bananas go ripe.
Right, yeah, exactly. Same thing. You stick your bananas on there. Exactly. So imagine that where you have one banana by itself versus the old gross brown banana, you stick the new ones on there and then they go brown within a few days versus the other one's still nice and green. It's the same concept. And so you really want to dry the plant to a point where the ethylene is no longer going to be present and off-gassed at a level that will hinder the bud itself. And it's, compared to the terpenes, it's even lighter, significantly lighter. I think some of the monoterpenes are like around 120 something grams per mole, which is 28 grams is really, 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 really light. So you're talking this molecule weighs less than some larger atoms. So very, very small.
That's crazy. You can actually measure the weight of that.
Quick
Right?
question. Is there a way to, without spending a bunch of money on scientific equipment like we all like to do, is there a way to measure the ethylene off gas, say in your tent exhaust, to see if and when it's ready?
Yeah, so right now I'm talking with someone who's working on something of the sort, but it's essentially I don't think there is any like home grow level ethylene sensor.
Right.
However, I truly believe that that's something that's very valuable to monitor. And if anyone has seen or utilizes any sort of home sensing data, you get the nice graphs, and I think ethylene being on that graph would aid in understanding kind of where your plant's at, especially in late flower, because you're able to then, which once again, the research is, we're talking about bleeding edge of science here, but eventually I think there's going to be some standardized values for ethylene off-gassing in correlation to certain like age markers or maturation points. So you could harvest at this, this ethylene range is where you want to harvest. So yeah, it's really interesting.
It's what we're trying to do in my lab at Princeton State. My professor got permission from the state and NSF funding, so we spent a bunch of money on sensors. Right now we're going controls. It's boring.
And so you're going to be testing ethylene specifically, or?
This experiments is ethylene. I haven't decided what I'm doing yet. I'm going to
Nice.
wait till the controls are done and then go from there.
Yeah, I mean, ethylene's a big thing within cannabis. I mean, it's been well known in other plants, and especially within the fruit industry. Imagine with storing fruit and making sure that ethylene does not build up and all that. So it's now applying that to cannabis
We use the banana trick to harvest tomatoes after they hit the breaker stage. We
Nice.
just throw them in a bucket and throw a banana in there and just
Yeah.
everybody picks them up
Right.
in a couple days.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I guess touching on drying versus curing, drying, you're really aiming to reduce that moisture content. And like I said, it's kind of almost like slowly, you're allowing the plant to die slowly. And if you allow it to die slowly, you can preserve, that really beautiful state, which is primarily in the state of the trichomes. And your goal is really to prevent mold and rapid oxidation of cannabinoids, as well as allowing for chlorophyll and all the other kind of plant parts to break down. Curing is mainly on preserving the remaining and desirable moisture at a consistent relative humidity, as well as the breakdown of biological residues. And you're really just finishing off that in a way. It's just like with curing meat and all the different things you can cure. You're really trying to give it a good finish. And you're allowing that flower to reach that desirable state. So just remember, drying is preparation and curing is preservation. So here, yeah, there's some old, it's not the best fidelity picture, but you can still see it from here, which speaks to how it, once you see mold, especially if it's on your own flower, because you'll have like a traumatic experience and you'll never forget what it looks like, because you'll always remember. I don't know. I had one experience where I brought my plants in, and I knew it was going to rain, and they were outdoor, and I was bringing them in, and as I was putting them in the garage, it started to drizzle. So they got not like super wet, but they got definitely a little wet water on them. brought them in the garage, had two big fans going on them and everything. But it would just kept raining all through the night. And I didn't have a really like good way to get them in a, drier environment because the garage is, somewhat permeable to the outdoor environment. And so I had a dehumidifier in there and it kept filling up like within the hour. And I don't know what happened, but it came out in the morning at like 7 and it had shut off. Like the dehumidifier had shut off. And just overnight from 9 p.m. when they were outdoor to 7 a.m., there was visible mold just in that short duration of time. So it can happen like that. And, and that's considering that the humidifier or dehumidifier went out at, who knows, in the middle of the night. So, yeah, it can happen incredibly fast. But the most important goal is to prevent the start of mold. You need to get your fresh cut weed below 65% RH and keep it below 65. 65 is that golden number that you, or I should say the I wouldn't call it golden.
Threshold.
Yeah.
Upper limit.
And curing, you should go between that 50 and 62 in ambient temperatures, and mold will grow after curing if buds or during curing if buds reach or exceed 65. So a lot of people have tried the jar method. I'm sure most of you have tried that, where after you're done drying, you put them into a jar. The dangerous thing about the jars is that they have low air volume, and if you don't dry properly, that air volume can rise in relative humidity very quickly because there's not any extra air that can kind of act as a buffer. These bags that you guys got, those big brown Boveda bags, are really good because they are up to a pound, and so you can, I would advise you to put in a less than half amount for your curing and leave that 62% RH pack in there, and it'll work really well, and it'll give you that buffer where if you did accidentally put them in too high, as long as you have that hygrometer in there to make sure that you can check that and just to double check where you're at, it'll suit you really well, because not only do the Boveda packs add moisture, but they can absorb the moisture as well, and so it kind of keeps it in the balanced range. Go ahead, Brian.
Is this me? Oh, well, what's the point of curing? Right, to smoke weed. You want to smoke your own weed, right? Like, no, but just to reiterate, properly dried and cured cannabis retains all that weight, the flavors, the terpenes, So, but I think it boils down to the plant itself. It's always changing. From drying, growing, if you guys have probably done this already, it's going to change from your veg when you start flowering all the way to the harvest, all the way to the cure, even post-cure. Things are always changing. Those terpenes are always mixing around. And within a curing is when you're actually allowing those to get to its full maturity, right? So for example, red wine, right? You make the red wine, you bottle it. It's going to taste different at day 1, but guess what? In 6 months, it's going to be at its peak. That's drink it all, right? Same thing with your weed. Roll some big fat joints with it. But curing is more than just a step. It's a cultivation, and it's also an art form. Anytime we are burping or trying to release those gases, you're always flushing it with fresh air, which is also changing. The plant is always releasing the ethylene to a certain period. And then those terpenes are going to get more predominant. So the fresh cut grass smell starts to dissipate, and then your terpenes will start to rise above that and be the most predominant smell. If you still, during your cure, if you still smell that grass, keep burping, keep opening. Your nose is going to tell you when it's ready. So we did a quick study here, along with right after that dry, we went into what happens during the cure. And we were essentially just looking at the relative humidity percentages here. And we call that a purge, no purge, a scientific term for burp, no burp, I guess. But you can see, so we got 15, all the way up to 25 days. And, you know, without that purge, you can see, remember that mold threshold? We don't ever want to be north of 65. So within 5 days of burping, you're actually getting it into that safe zone. But that no purge, after, gosh, I don't even know how many days, you probably see mold within first 3-4 days with just keeping that jar closed or your container closed.
Yeah, especially right here, like, I mean, this is pretty far into it. So there's probably
It's
probably
crazy, right?
quite a bit of mold there, but at that point, you can just see how it's continuously, you know, letting off all of those, in this case, the water. It's just, you know, if you do not, let it out, it's gonna really just build up. And
That's a good point. It starts to climb within the container. All that residual water is coming out. Oh, we had a note down here. Yeah, so
Yeah, but it looked like.
Prematurely.
Bottom of that jar.
yeah. So again, you're not only allowing those gases to escape, you're allowing the residual water, moisture, humidity that's in the air to escape, right? Keeping your mold free, your buds in healthy states.
yeah, and just so you guys know, at this point, like, you can see how much you drop initially. Once you are getting those initial burps or because this bud ideally, you know, is already optimally dried, and so you're right around that same point here. Looks like 67 or so %. But as the plant breaks down too, you get less, essentially more susceptibility to mold. You know, if you have a completely non-living organism that has no defenses whatsoever, you know, they're going to be able to take hold pretty quickly.
Matt, question for you. On
Yeah.
that last graph. So like, for example, if I did the orange route and I'm measuring my jar and I'm seeing that like it's above 65% for that first 10 days, almost like me as a grower, should I start to get nervous? Like, oh shoot, like this has been creeping above 65% for several days.
So this is water activity too, which, or I should say that it was
Measured in water activity,
conversing. Yeah. So,
but it's still relative humidity.
yeah. So basically, this section here, I mean, I would say yes. And that's partly too why if you dry and remember, these are just this test results, like this doesn't represent everything. And so,
Because I've had moments where I get nervous that like, oh, I probably should wait, keep drying this one long.
Right.
Yeah. I always get nervous at this example.
Were you getting a stem crack?
It was starting to crack and several of them were, and then I had a couple still that were, and so I was kind of like right in that range. I was like,
Yeah. You're kind of right in that range. I get it. You know, you're like, oh, should I start clearing or drying?
Yeah, we can talk about it later. But anyway, so I was just curious on, what would you do if you kind of kept seeing, high numbers for your first several days?
was this used with Boveda packs or not?
No, so this is without.
Yeah, so that's
So this is without it. Yeah, I would be nervous if I was at 65 and it held there for more than 3-4 days. Absolutely. At that point, I'd probably get a fan going on it or some type of air moving. Yeah, you got to get it down fast because mold and yeast lives on everything. You just got to get it in a happy environment for it to grow a green beard on something, right? So.
Yeah, because it's a dead plant that molds, that's its job. Its job is to
decompose it, go back to Mother Earth. Yeah. Or you can add a Boveda pack in there, those work.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say is that, they're like, exactly.
Yeah, good question though. Yeah, so just I guess a recap on the curing, we're trying to remove that excess water. Sometimes, you don't have scientific equipment at home, so drying and cracking the stems is just, you're going to hear it, but you definitely want to get down to that level. And you can also dry too fast, I was mentioning. You dry in that surface area where your trichomes live. Trichomes are home, 99% of your terpenes reside in that trichome head. So you dry too fast, those trichomes are going to get very brittle, dry very quickly, and outgas all those terpenes. Ethylene's going to be removed along with those gas compounds, that grass smell. obviously that terpene profile of the monos and terps or the suspensions, they're going to start shifting, right? You could have, I've seen so many terpenes that were high levels on day one, and then all of a sudden, you know, a month later, they flipped. Quite honestly, myrcene is the one that I've always seen evaporate quick. But hey, we're gonna smoke this, right? So you're gonna feel that back of your throat sometimes if you hit some weed that it's not cured properly or dried, right? It's kind of, you know, like, yeah, I'll keep smoking it because you let me, but so yeah, it's a plant, guys. Things are always changing. Once it decomposes, go back to Mother Earth, and we're trying to keep it in like this state of, what's the word I'm looking for? Animation, state animation.
It's basically preserving it, and that what ideally, I've always been fascinated with the idea of if you could preserve what the plant, how the plant is when it's alive, you know, like they smell so much, a lot of times so much different when they're living, and they have, you know, they're consistently reproducing what they're losing, and so you kind of always get that. But the moment you cut that supply off of nutrients and light and life, right, the factors for life, you start to lose the ability for the plant to produce. So then it's a game of, you know, can I lock this down in some sort of an environment before we lose, you know, enough of these terpenes, so then it's no longer a good representation of what made that plant so unique in the first place. Because if you just have 5 different cultivars with the same cannabinoid levels and you dry them out to bone dry, they're all the same at that point, because the majority of the, you know, the effective chemicals are retained, but the unique kind of complementary cannabinoids, or I should say terpenes, that are known to really enhance the entourage effect are now gone, and so you lose that uniqueness of the flower.
Everybody loves baseline bud.
Yeah.
So within the curing, I should say, when you weigh your weed and you weigh for the first time and then you dry and cure and then you weigh it again, that difference in weight, most of that is water weight. And there's 2 different types of water that are actually trapped within that cellular structure of the plant itself. And that it's free water and bound water. So those 2 together is a total moisture content or the water weight within your bud. When you're drying, that free water is the free water that it can evaporate and leave and come back very quickly. That bound water is what you're trying to allow it to release from the inside and allow it to kind of push out to the perimeter or the surface area of your bud. That's curing. That's allowing that residual water to kind of pull through. But yeah, so the combination of the both of those 2 is just the total water in your sample.
A way to look at this here, the free water is in the tissue that is called the xylem, and it basically pulls all the water through the plant, and so that xylem runs all the way down to the roots. And this plant, I actually left this for a long time, like in my grow room, just kind of sitting there to continuously dry out to the point where it's very like fragile now, because at this point there's really no bound water left. Like there, you know, you could weigh this and then incinerate it and then weigh the remaining ashes, and you would then know really like what is left over from that. And that's what we do for soil. It's the same thing too. Soil is the same way. It has the free water that moves through it, and then you have the water that really is, you know, adhering to all the different structural elements in there. So knowing the amount of free water is critical when drying and curing. If it's too high, mold will grow. 65% or above, once again, that's 65%. You never want to go above that. Even if you think you're below, sometimes if you don't dry properly, you might have removed a large amount of this free water, which is often what happens when you dry too fast and then end up trying to cure too early. All this bound water will then make its way into the surrounding environment and then create too high of humidity, and then cause mold. And curing is letting that bound water gradually move to the outside, creating a uniform saturation level from inside to outside. A lot of times with that uniform saturation level, most people will that struggle with the curing process will not have it'd be a gradient where you have too much water on the inside, too little on the outside, where you'll feel the bud and be like, oh, this feels pretty dry. But you put it in a container and then the next day you pull it out and it's like almost soggy because it really evened out. But that evened out level is much higher than desirable. So how long? Yeah, that's kind of this is where it comes down to, preference really, because if you did everything right up to this point, there's a lot of debate on, how long you should cure. For me, I mean, to be honest, I guess I really am, I think once you're done drying, the bud is ready to be consumed, but in the sense of you can consume as you're curing. But during the drying is, I think my first grow, I put the bud in like an air fryer and literally dried it out like the day of to try it, and it was horrible.
Microwave.
Yeah, and what did I what? Oh yeah, funny. Yeah, no, it was not a good experience. The chlorophyll is really gross, and so really what you're getting with curing is continuing to elevate those flavors, the flavonoids, the terpenes, the volatile sulfur compounds. You're continuing to elevate that because you're stripping away all of those other elements that are the byproducts of breakdown. So a 2-month long cure where you really have it locked in, that the bud is at a point where you can just leave it sealed and it's not going to mold. You leave that for 2 months and you crack it open. Boy, it's a really awesome experience.
I can tell you, with a lot of the LPs and multi-set operators that we work with at Boveda, some of them will cure for 3 months, 4 months. Now, those are the buds that are artisanal, they're well cared for, manicured, and some don't even cure. They actually put it in the package, and by the time it gets to you, that's their cure. So also, depending upon the bud structure, if it's, extremely dense versus fluffy, these can all range and change.
Yeah, I've grown. That was kind of my intent. I grew a bunch of different genetics over the year. I don't think I've really grown the same thing twice for the purpose of when I had the realization that the plants were so unique, like they grew differently based on their genetics, way more than, even like if you think of tomatoes, I don't know how many gardeners we have here, but if you think of tomatoes, you grow 2 different cultivars of tomatoes and sure, one might have more vigor or it might need more space or something like that, but really there's not that much difference. But cannabis is finicky down to, lighting and even wind. And there's so many different factors that if you're really trying to optimize the plants, the genetics there's so much variety. And so when it comes down to curing, there's some buds that are inherently, dense, like Brian said, where it takes a lot longer in even just the drying phase. And that's going to consequently lead to more terpene loss, but that's just the genetic consequence of that. If you have bud that's more on the airy side, you might be able to preserve that more, but then you don't get as much weight with it. And so, yeah, it all is really varying. So the more experience you guys get too with seeing those different types of buds and how they dry, that'll really kind of connect with all the knowledge from this class and catapult you further than the rest. And when it's complete, the best thing is use your nose. Like Brian said earlier, you can kind of when you smell enough bud as it's drying, you really can pick up on that that change and the purity almost of the terpenes, right? Like it's this pure experience.
That's
Yeah,
key.
smoke some along the journey. There you go. And this, you'll be able to tell. I mean, we've all had, I would hope, some good cannabis at some point. So we kind of have a reference point to go off of. And I would say really lean on that as you guys are learning more and more about that is like, you know, what's good to us. This is a very, you know, within reason, good cannabis is very much, you know, your own opinion. So reflect that on. And some people like super dried bud. Some people like, you know, much more moist bud. Like you said earlier with the terpenes and baking and all that, like that's a very valid point. Terpenes, if any of you get a chance to like just try terpenes by themselves, they don't taste good by themselves. Like they're very potent and they aren't enjoyable. And it's like I said, it's a hydrocarbon. I mean, it's like it's not enjoyable to consume them in mass.
Some of them are cleaners, right? Was it
Yeah,
like a little?
they're solvents. Yeah,
Solvents.
they're.
We're not designed for enrichment. We're designed.
But yeah, for that purpose that you said, I mean, that makes sense, you know, because you might want to remove them. And so, no, it's okay.
I was trying to say if it's a savory flavor, it can actually taste good, but if it's a sweet flavor, it's horrible.
Right. Yeah. And they, like we said, I mean, imagine when you're smelling those, you can't see it, right? Nobody can see them. They're super tiny. There's not that many at once. You're like, when you're smelling that, that's in a very low moderation. Think of it as like a candy, you know, that you've had candy that has too much flavor concentrate in it. And it's like, it almost burns your mouth. It's too much. It's the same concept here. And then really your fresh cut grass smell is your kind of indicator that you're going to be tracking with your nose. The terpenes are muted. It'll start to flip over time. And then once you get to that curing point, your fresh cut grass smell is for the most part gone, if not completely, because like we said, that means that there's other chemicals that are off gassing. And so if you throw it into the jar when it smells like that, it will build up. And especially if there's, you know, likely if you smell some funky smell that isn't the terpenes, then it's likely ethylene is involved. And so you might see degradation in your bud. Yeah, you're storing in the right conditions with the right container is imperative.
Question on that.
Yeah.
Some people say to avoid sunlight completely or indirect light completely while it's curing. Is that a myth or is there some truth to that?
I mean, I would.
It's truth.
Yeah, I would say it's truth for sure. Because I mean, you get with light degradation, that's a big thing, especially with cannabinoids. I mean, there's been some evidence on how those conversions take place. I know that specifically the THC degradation into CBN is catalyzed by light, and so it's simply providing light as energy. And if you're providing energy, you're going to get degradation because it's continuing on through its pipeline. And you know, that pipeline is usually the loss of some kind of atom from
once
that.
it catalyzes something, it's just.
It just kind of keeps going.
Until there's nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Take this one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so here we go. Some storage containers and how to I
These are
use
awesome.
ball jars and I use sea vaults. But one thing that you want to make sure, a couple of things here is you want to make sure that it's airtight container, right? Those big Boveda bags in there, they're airtight, but they also allow a little bit of curing to occur. But yeah, still want to keep them away from direct light and the high temps, UV energy. Temps just accelerate drying, as you know. That burping, we know, right? You have to open and close your container. As we already mentioned, that grass smell, sometimes a hay smell you might get, that's going to escape. It only happens when you burp daily. Sometimes what I'll do is those sea vaults or even with your jar, you have to remember too, as it's curing, it's probably going to compress on each other or, you know, the weight, just kind of rotate them around, especially when it's, if it's at a good humidity level, you're not going to get a lot of trichome and keef break off in your container. And then obviously, our Boveda packs can gradually remove that bound water slowly. It's not a fast and hard cure, and it helps prevent that mold growth. And we keep saying 65. There's studies that were out there by the Cannabis Safety Institute back in, I don't know, 10 years ago. And they remeasured, I think, 10 or 12 different strains at all different RH levels. And they noticed at 65 was the start of that growth, mold growth. So that's why we're always keeping things below that, 62 and even below there. So
I want to touch on the different packs, like percentage wise, because I've experimented with 55, 58, and 62, as in what the smoking experience is like at that level. And there's some trade-offs. With 62%, you get amazing flavor, amazing, like out of this world flavor. Like it's weird how, you know, it can taste so good. But you don't get as much, like if you enjoy getting some hash or keef, I guess, you really aren't going to get any, which could be a good thing, but also for some people I know that they look for that and they enjoy it. So as in if you're pulling it right out of a 60, if you have this in your storage container, which like I said, with this Boveda pack, that's literally what all my stuff is in. I have all the different strains, different bags in that bag with the 2 packs in there. And it's just killer. Like it smells like incredible in that bag. There's so many cultivars in there. But then the 58, you kind of get a good balance where you still get really good smoke. You get good flavor, but you get a little bit more keef production. And then on the bottom side of 55, you're going to get a little more harsher smoke. So maybe if you smoke with a bong or something where you have that water filtration, 55 might be okay for you. But if you're doing a direct like pipe, 55 for me, it always ends up burning my throat. And so that's why I tend towards 62. And so I always keep it at 62, knowing that I can't go, once those terpenes are gone, they're gone. I'd rather keep as many as possible, put it out, you know, maybe it dries out a little bit, but you know, at least I started off at a good high point. Rather than if you were to say, keep it with a 55 pouch, you take that out, you forget about it on the counter for 30 minutes in January in Minnesota, you just lost a lot of terpenes in that 20 minutes. And so it's, you know, it's kind of a trade-off, but that's just my 2 cents with the
If you
packs.
use the 55, would that be for something like you're storing, getting ready for edibles?
I mean, yeah, I guess. Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know if
I don't know.
yeah, with, I don't
You
know.
don't really want terpenes in edibles because you don't care about.
Right, yeah, sure, you could say that, but even in this, even in that sense, I mean, too, when you have a sealed container. And if you have that good balance, like the bud is dried out enough where it's not going to continuously off gas this moisture, and you say you didn't have a Boveda pack in there and it was at 55 flat, like, and you seal it in a C vault, it's really not going to change that much because the terpenes will basically reach a point in there where they're at capacity. And so then they're not, when you take that lid off and you get that first, it's like punch in the face smell, that's all that escaping, but then you put the lid on and then it kind of will refill again. Yeah, so it'll reach this like point where it's really not going to change in a properly sealed environment. There's not many things that can compete with a stainless steel rubber gasket, right? Like that's probably the best case you can get. Even these bags, I mean, you reseal it and you leave the little corner there, and you know, you'd never notice.
Good until you pop them open the first time.
Right.
Wax seal is done.
Oh, and I dropped them on my, you know, basement floor. That's fun to clean up.
Yeah. But
Just smoke the glass. Man.
Yeah, Seabolt's telling you. Here, let me grab that. I think this one's me. All right, so we keep saying Boveda. If you guys don't know who or what Boveda is, we were a company founded in '97, privately held in Hopkins, our headquarters, Minnesota. And we defined and built this 2-way humidity control packs. And we sell these to the premium cigar, music, and cannabis. What is Boveda? So these small packs come in all different sizes, but they're originally just 3 different ingredients, if you would. The paper, which is on the outside, of craft paper. We have a little thin membrane, and then literally we take salt and water and a food grade thickening agent that's inside. So it's salt water. We use all food grade salts, take those food grade salts, blend them with reverse osmosis water. And we use 13 different salts at the moment to create 10 different commercial formulas. So the ones that we have in your bags right now for cannabis, we have ones that go all the way up to 84%, all the way down to 32. The unique thing is the two-way humidity control. So you ask yourself, like, what is two-way humidity control? Essentially, what it is your pack will release water vapor and bring water vapor in to that pack and the environment that it's placed into. Some people think it's a desiccant. It's not a desiccant. It's also a humectant. A desiccant is like one of these, shoot back, like a damp rid or those gel packs you get into your shoes and leather jacket pockets, which I don't know if it's doing anything. That's a desiccant. That's always trying to keep things dry. Humectant always wants to push water vapor out or keep humidity high. We do the same thing, or this pack can do both. It's like dialing your thermostat into your house at 68, so you can turn the furnace on or the AC. So how does it work? Okay, so this is a term we call equilibrium. Everything comes to equal. So in this example right here, in this container, I've got 35% RH. Can you see that? Let me step over here. So the air in here is 35%. If I added a 62% Boveda into that jar, the air will now get to 35 or 62% because of the pack itself. How does that look like for weed? Same thing. If I have some bud that's in that same jar, in the air in that bud or in the container is 45. If I add a 62% Boveda, what's going to happen is that air in the bud is going to get to 62. It's releasing that water vapor. The other side of pulling it back in, down here, removing the water. So if the bud is above 62 and so is the air in that container above the 60, it'll pull that water in and keep it within the pack. So your bud in the air is always going to maintain 62%. At different pack sizes we have for different poundage, all the way down to 1 gram, below 1 gram as well. So we think about what can evaporate. We already talked about the terpenes, maintain the trichome health, moisture and weight, right? Cannabis is sold by the weight, so water is weight. You sell dry weed, you're selling weed that you probably make money on, but just rehydrating it. And then we're talking about that prevent mold, over dry bud, and just the overall quality. So everybody knows what these are, right? Trichomes. A lot of different cool trichomes, but if we look at trichome health on the right-hand side, these cool pictures, but on the right-hand side, you can see how unique that trichome is. And majority of those terpenes and cannabinoids all reside within there. So, and what's other interesting is not only just the terpenes, but believe it or not, there's a little bit of a waxy surface on the outside of that trichome that helps protect it. But is it protein? Is it protein? There you go. You could eat trichomes, guys. It's good protein for your workouts. Okay, so this we keep going down this path, right? So if you keep a healthy, this is right at harvest, right? The zoomed up versions of trichomes, really nice and healthy. Without humidity control, I just leave it in open air. This is about what it looks like at 12 days. The trichome heads are still kind of the same nice shape. The stalks are a little thin. Still looks pretty healthy. Not cloudy though, a little clear. And then here you go at 1 month without anything, nice and dried up. I can't even see the trichome heads anymore. Maybe some are present, but this right here is shitty weed. This is 2 months without it. All this is going to fall off. Majority is going to be in the bottom of your container. And I would imagine, think about just the organic matter in there. You smoke this is probably, my throat just hurts thinking about it. Okay, so really cool thing, back to this trichome, what's going to evaporate? Cannabinoids are changing, H2O is going to evaporate, and those terpenes are going to evaporate. When you add humidity control into your container, we want to protect the trichomes. And what's occurring is once it's reaching that equilibrium at that 62%, a unique thing is happening. A monolayer of water is being coated around that trichome and is stopping to prevent those terpenes from evaporating out of your trichome head. Really fancy graphic, but honestly, what I like to do, it's like a helmet, man. You're going to protect that guy, right? All the way until you get through that cure, keep it fresh, right? So monolayer water is going to protect it for the trichome. You're going to significantly reduce those terpene losses. Now, remember back, we had 40% trichome or terpenes or lots just in the drying curing. So imagine how much is in there, and we want to help, retain and keep it inside. And obviously, the storage vessels have a unique environment optimal for a terpene retention. So one thing that does happen is if I'm locking my terpenes into the trichome and into the weed, that means I'm not going to smell it in a container. You might smell a little, like a very small hint to it. And what's really happening is from a smell intensity, we took and did a study that we had someone smell the buds from at 52% all the way to 62. And this is just a whole bud on ground. And that was measured by its smell intensity. As soon as you ground this weed, now you've went from all the way up to the 62%, and we've got the highest level of intensity. We went to, I can't name drop them, but we have some super sensory people that literally worked to smell garbage bags and things like that. They could pick things out. And super sensory noses were actually able to provide this. So we had almost a 20% smell increase from that low side. Down here, right? You're talking evaporation, dry weed. Your curing's messed up, a little dry. So you can see you're trying to keep those terpenes locked until the point you're going to grind it and use it. So here's another interesting study that we performed. We drove around the US and Canada. We smoked a lot of weed and tested a lot of weed. And at this point, we had 150 samples that we tested, all different styles of packaging as well, cartons, paperboard tubes, whatever, bags. And we plotted them on this graph. So on the left-hand side, these are all relative humidities of the weed that was there. Not a very small percent were actually in that range of 65 to 55. Anything below that 55, we found was that evaporation zone. And obviously anything above, which would be good, we didn't find any that were moldy. But 80% of these are below that 55, 52, which is that evaporation zone. So, and these are some of those big ones out there as well.
Brian?
Yeah.
Do you notice a consistent packaging at all for any of those low evaporations?
Yes, they were very, I would kind of look at them just like a dust cover. It was good for graphics. It looked awesome, but it didn't have any barriers to them. They could let light in. Didn't have a good seal to them, and it didn't have a Boveda pack. Majority of them, I guess throw that in there once in a while. But yeah, we've tested some products that just the paperboard tubes with some plastic caps. That looks awesome, and you think it works, but that's paper. It's going to hold water out. It's not plastic or some type of a barrier. I see that with pre-roll joints as well. Yeah. So obviously, dry trichomes are brittle, fragile. They've lost some potency. Keep it between that range to get a healthy, bad, good. So the other unique thing, and I mentioned this before, I wanted to share this, is water is weight, right? So if you have dry weed, you can rehydrate it. So in this example, I've got weed that starts at 50%. What do we got? I got 1,000 pounds, and just the standing weight of this, so $5 per gram is $2.2 million of weed sitting here. If I didn't control the humidity and I left it out to dry, and I had a 5% drop just in humidity, $15,000. Now, obviously, I don't think we're all sitting on 1,000 pounds, but you could probably move the decimal point couple over, you know, to that range. 150, maybe to 15, depending upon how much you have. So let's take that same example where I've got same weed, same strain at 50%. And all I did was just brought it up to 62. Just by raising the humidity to 62% of your weed, a 12% increase in an RH. And this example is a $48,000 gain in revenue. So a lot of the innovation things that we're doing, I can tell you that, you know, if you sell your weed, if you sell dry weed, there's an opportunity to get it to that healthy state, but also potentially make a little bit extra dollars on your side. And quite honestly, if you did get weed at 62, what Matt was saying earlier, if it dropped, now you're losing money because that water weight's gone. So you can always try to keep it around or the highest level you can without mold. Okay, I think this might be the last slide, but the absence of terpene smell in your container with the humidity control or at that 62 is good. You got to prevent those trichomes from, you know, damage and evaporation. And you can increase your profit if you need to by adding RH control and prevent some of that loss from just dry buds. And that's it. Any questions we can answer for you guys?
I got a quick question. So one of the most common things in the market right now that we see being pushed to home growers are the plant controls.
Yeah.
Do those actually work in the 4 days they claim, or is this more like, hey, we're gonna just push this to the point where we're almost bucking it and you get what you get? Or is it actually a real humidor that is gonna work?
I have not used them, but I do know a couple people who did. And they purchased them right after they screwed up the dry and cure because they didn't want to mess up anymore. And he did say it worked. So it's pulling residual. He honestly just left it in there for 2 months. It was fine. So
I mean, it's an $1,800 investment, right?
yes.
And depending on how much you're processing, you know, I thought 4 days was kind of insanely quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say if the biological processes can be
Accelerated that fast. That
like
was my
done, like, cause yeah, you're waiting on, cause, and I can't really speak to it either, to be honest. I did a little bit of digging cause I recently heard about it. The first time I think was at Cannabis, and then I dug into it a little bit, but I think it uses like colder temps too or something. I don't remember, but it has some, you know, unique combination process. And I know last time there's been some research for the last class got brought up around the drying cannabis at a commercial scale with
freezers.
yeah, basically pulling out like almost like freeze drying it kind of. But then like I said, then there's the kind of, you know, what are you using it for? If you're going to process it, then that's probably a great option. If you're going to smoke the flower, that's probably not a great option.
Right.
But a Canatrol, that's the thing is I think there's a lot of customization that, like I said, I haven't looked into enough, but
You can dial it in.
yeah, exactly.
That's the good
From what
thing.
I
You
mean,
wanted to get that scientific and
even if it's not
short
4
ranges.
days, I think it would be a safe option because it's taking care of a lot of the, it's minimizing, you know, if you're drying in a room this size, open air versus the tiny Canatrol,
Right.
you're minimizing a lot of the risk there. But I do know that a lot of people, you know, you gotta, it's just a different philosophy. Like for me, I mean, I enjoy drying on the plant.
Yeah.
I think that there's something to be said there with the slow, you know, especially if you keep the buds on the branches. I mean, it's almost like an umbilical cord where it's like not allowing them to dry too quickly. And so it's kind of a buffer for that. But with the Canatrol, I mean, I'm pretty sure it comes with like presets where you can just kind of let it go. I think, like I said, I don't know, but.
I've been considering it, but I plan on the current grow, in the tent that it was in, is the tent that's gonna dry.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then, cause I have another tent that's gonna do something else. But if I can get an $1,800 device, it's gonna first hold everything and then speed it up, I'd be interested.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know much about them, other than there are presets and I do know they work. It's all up to you. If you want to, I'm sure you can cure or dry and cure in 4 days, but you're sacrificing a lot of probably those trichomes and terpenes that are bye-bye,
Yeah.
I
But
feel that the
It
longer,
could be a solution to mold, but it might not offer the best end result for like the phytochemical composition. But like I said, I'm not sure yet. I'm sure there's gonna be more and more of those kind of consumer products coming out in the next few years that are looking at simplifying some of these things and, but the science is always behind, right? It's always gonna be lagging behind. There's gonna be the one guy who's like, this works, I don't know why, but it does. And then eventually one method will take on, traction within the markets. And then eventually there'll be a study that explains,
There's already
an optimal method. So, yeah,
There's a whole lot of.
right. And that's the thing. And
unless
that's
you
why
get
it's hard
confused.
that's why it's hard to comment on it because, a lot of like I deal with as much as close as I can to absolutes and fact as I can. And so I'm trying to, when I look at something like the Canitrol, it's like, okay, how is this investment better than the room I have, and the elements that or swapping it with a tent, it's like, is 2 weeks worth $1,800? Can you make something like that on your own once the software becomes available? There's a lot of questions about it, but I know you had a question, sir.
Are you able to bring back moisture in the Boveda packs? Like if they dry out completely?
Like rehydrate.
Oh, rehydrate the packs. You can, but I do not recommend it. There's two things that can happen is you can overshoot. So wherever it's safe, it was at 62 and it dried out and you try to rehydrate it. You don't know if you're going to be back at 62. It could be higher, could be in the 65 or potentially lower. But also the membrane itself, depending upon the water and where you're at. So we use that RO water so it freely can move out. Sometimes it'll slow down as well. Yeah, I do see people putting them in bowls of water and letting them swell up. That's bad.
That's
Yeah.
How long do those last?
How long do they last?
Depends, I guess.
It really
on
depends.
how you're treating it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have a glass jar, I mean, I've got weed that's over 3 years old, 4 years old in glass jars with Boveda packs, the same one. I don't open it up other than to show people and smell it every so often. But I've seen some that at the higher the barrier, the higher the water barrier, the longer the pack is going to last. And also how often you're going to open it, close it.
Yeah.
So
Some of the small ones, like I don't know what the smallest size are, but
little postage stamp one.
yeah, the little postage stamp ones, like I would throw one of those in my little bag and like a Grove bag. I have these little Grove bags that I use and I throw them in there and just from opening it and closing it, it lasted like probably 3-4 weeks. But then on the flip side with the bigger packs that I believe you guys got in the big bags, those will last you a long time. So I loaded up my harvest from this plant back in I think it was October or something. But I loaded up the bag with it and it was great. I mean, they're still in there. I added 2, but the bud I put them in there at 60, right? What I dried it to 62%. And I put the 62% bag in there. So really it's didn't even have to add anything. It just kind of maintains. So every time I crack it open, take out a nug or whatever and reclose it, which I would advise that you have another smaller container too, if you possibly can. That's maybe a week's worth or so. That way you don't have to keep opening and closing your kind of like main reservoir that's supposed to last you ideally, 6 months. Like this plant yielded 580 grams. So, and I'm still have a lot left. So, yeah, that's driveway. Yeah. This plant
I asked him the
was,
same thing.
if you pick this plant was 5 foot by 5 foot, meaning if you picked it up like this, you would not even be able to see me because it would cover my entire body. Yeah, I trellised it out like into a big
I'm sure
square.
we might have.
Yeah.
But
So,
go back to your point, doesn't make a difference the size of the Boveda pack. You can never overhydrate. Just never make sure with your weed. Don't ever put a higher 62 than that. Just keep it at 62 or below.
Do you guys have any like color indicators that say, hey, there's not enough of the Boveda, or there's too much of the Boveda?
No,
It'll
they're
be crunchy.
not very accurate.
It'll get kind of crunchy.
Yeah,
That's
and
really
plus
the-
there's some chemicals in there that I don't want close to products and food and
Sure.
weed. So
Question, going back to, drying, wet trimming versus dry trimming. Do you have a preference on when to take some sugar leaves off or not to?
and what do you do, Matt?
I mean, I would say sugar leaves during dry trim, wet trim. I mean, I would leave them on with, I leave most of my sugar leaves on and just cut the tips off actually. It depends on how big they are, because sugar versus fan, all the fans get removed. The sugars that are a little smaller below, then if they have a lot of trichomes on them, just leave them. And then with wet trim, dry trim, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm a fan of dry trim just because with wet trim, that how sensitive the trichome heads are. Like if you literally touch them when they're wet, and they'll just grab onto each other, and so you end up, in my opinion, creating more damage. This isn't scientific or anything. Like I haven't tested that or read anything that's arguing for one or the other. But if you dry trim, not at a dry trim where you're, when it's too dry, where you snip and then you can see them all the trichomes falling off. You're like, no. Like,
Trim over the.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, trim in for sure. But yeah, that's 62%, if you dry to that, it's almost like a perfect intermediate in between. But yeah, does that get to your question? Was it more of?
It is, because like I wet trimmed on one of my last rows, and I just noticed how quickly that drying process went. I mean, I thought I was shooting for a 10-day drying process, and I think
Fast.
after almost like 4 days, I was like, oh shoot, this is like a couple of these are snapping.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was just like, I thought it was probably due to this, because the humidity in the room was right where I wanted it. Dark was only this wet trim. And so I was just curious if you think the sugar leaves help to retain that moisture barrier as the buds are kind of drying out.
Yes,
I think so.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
for sure, yeah. So that's where the fans are almost too much. But the sugar leaves, when you hang them upside down, you've seen when they kind of almost create this like encapsulation. Yeah, like you want that. In my opinion, you want that, because if you got good airflow, that's gonna literally there's less air molecules that are passing by those trichomes or stripping away the excess terpenes that are there. So it's literally creating this like cocoon almost for it.
Yeah.
So
And if you've got some air movement in your room, if you want a slower dry or a slower cure, leaving those sugar leaves on help.
yeah.
So if someone had like aphids or bugs at the end of the harvest.
Yeah.
I've read some people may say you could rinse the plants off.
Dunk them in like stuff. Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Ethanol.
What do you recommend? You would say that.
Yeah.
Just kind of disappear.
Have you had bugs die? I've had bugs die on my bud, like outdoors, so they're not going anywhere. And it's funny because you'll look and you'll see them, and it looks like they took a bite out of the trichome, and they must have got so blazed the little bug died in there. But yeah, and that's a function of trichomes. I mean, in terms of evolutionary function is for the pest to literally get stuck in the trichome, because it's big, sticky, they just get stuck in there. So even if you did rinse them, they're probably not coming off until it gets super dry. So I've done that before, actually. I don't remember why I did it, like in terms of what was the reason. But I had something, it was some sort of an outdoor, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was bug related. But I did like a baking soda, lemon juice kind of thing, which just was helping strip away some of the grossness. But I mean, it didn't turn out that well, and it was kind of an extra hassle to have to like dry soaked bud. You know what I mean? It was just not. It's almost like too much work than it was worth. So
So if you have aphids, just trim and let it
yeah, I mean aphids are annoying.
flower.
You're in flower and you got aphids?
Yeah, pretty much.
You can use rosemary and the tea tree oil.
That's the ladybugs.
The ladybugs is what I did. The ladybugs will, I mean, it's the larva that'll chow them, but yeah, the ladybug larva will absolutely just obliterate them. But because you're in flower, I don't know if it'll, the timing will line up, but
Might prevent more from coming in.
yeah, it's just their aphids are
Or
so
hard to get
annoying.
that, yeah.
Especially because in flower, the nutrient flow changes to their liking. So in veg, it's mostly nitrogen and they feed off more of the potassium and phosphorus. And so when it flips to flower, that the nutrient, like I said, the flow is different within the plants, and they have a little stylet that they drill in and start
Sucking it right out of there, huh?
So it's in flower, it's almost, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's very difficult, especially considering that we want to treat cannabis in a way that we want to smoke it. It's not like some other like bananas or whatever, where you can really just separate one part and then wash it up. And, we treat these buds with a lot more care and respect than a lot of other plants. So yeah, I think you might be stuck with some bug OG there with your, yeah.
The aphids aren't gonna hurt you, it's just that it's not really gonna be.
Destroys your
They
butt.
might get some like crackling. If
Yeah.
you smoke it, it might like crackle a little bit. Yeah, but it'll be fine. Once you feel it, you won't care. Anyway, Amazon.
Yeah,
You can literally buy them on Amazon. I don't know if that
Or your local,
A little goes a long way.
your local Ace Hardware as well.
hopefully more local sources will pop up. But yeah, ladybugs are really, really great for like integrated pest management, and they don't really like disturb your buds at all. They'll just kind of vibe out and
Hang on,
Little gardeners.
so
What do you doing with bugs?
aphids.
it's
Aphids.
a kind of, it's like an automating thing. They'll find their own. But yeah, it's kind of a self-automating thing where is the levels of pests go up, they'll go up, and as they go down, they'll go down, and they'll kind of just maintain this equilibrium, and that's relative to the amount of pests, and it'll fluctuate on its own.
But, well, I didn't mean feed, but I mean, you put like a little dish of water in there, do they need water and all?
They do.
Yeah, he's
They
Good.
need water. Food almost.
Yeah.
That's what I
Huh.
suspect.
right.
Okay, so just have a little shallow dish. Okay.
Put a
Yeah,
name
they'll
on
find
there. It's the ladybugs.
And remember, when you open your dish, keep your mouth closed.
Yeah.
Ladybugs bite.
Any other questions? Yes.
For the packs, can that interfere with any sort of like flavor or terpene profile in any way during curing? Like say without packs or with packs when you first start curing from drying?
Well, you mean interfering, meaning like it'll slow the natural evolution of terpenes kind of changing?
Yeah.
That is a good question. I'd have to imagine something's happening. There's a lot of unique things that are happening when hydration happens to this plant in the buds. I've done so much, and my team has done so much testing that once you think you've nailed it, all of a sudden you come up with like 20 other questions. I've seen different levels of monos jumping around all within the same strain, even from the same buds on the same stock. So yeah, but if you're always used to something, like your curing method is always the same, using your nose and throwing a Boveda pack in at whatever time within your curing, try it out. What I do love about it is it's painless, right? You throw it in, and even if you forgot about it, it's still going to keep doing its job. I mean, I've got containers that I've lost in my trunk over a couple of years, and There it is again. It's got a Boveda pack in, and I didn't smoke it. Gave it to someone else.
That's great, dude.
It's called blow your throat
Let's give it up for Matt and Brian.